Hello, the Base Gardener here, and today I want to talk a bit about the state of Canada. It's the same beautiful country I grew up in, but culturally and particularly within the cities, it's become almost unrecognizable. And this is something I've become curious about. And I've been spending time trying to figure out, to the best of my ability, what has led us to this. As a kid, I was always the type of person who had no problem being the one person in the room who disagreed with absolutely everybody. And this shaped a big part of my personality. Also, I came from a broken home, like many of us, and I'm sure some of you can relate. I always found it baffling how my parents could have two completely different perspectives on the same set of facts. And that's something I think that always kept me looking for what's actually true in a given situation. Strip away all the ideology and opinions. What's actually going on? What's true? And now we find ourselves living in a post-truth society. I first noticed something was going on maybe around 2013, 2014. I had an ex who was in university for social work. And I noticed when I would spend time with her friends that there were certain opinions that I just wasn't allowed to disagree with. If I expressed any dissent, I would have the whole group piling on me and genuinely angry. I remember one of the first ones that became a confrontation was around the idea of white privilege. I grew up pretty poor and experienced a lot of things that, like growing up in a house without running water and electricity, that I didn't associate with privilege, and so I challenged them on that, and it was just an opinion that was so deeply held that they would accept absolutely no dissent. And something I recognize now as being essentially an authoritarian mindset. And of course now we see that everywhere. From land acknowledgements to being told we're living in a post-national state. The idea that having any pride in our heritage is somehow bigoted. The idea that we all have to live in poverty while the elites of our society take private jets to Davos. And of course the big whopper that a man can magically become a woman. Now in Canada, not only are we perhaps number one in the woke mindset, but our cities are overrun with tent encampments. There's open, hard drug use in the streets. Our housing costs are 6, 10, 12 times our incomes. And good luck accessing healthcare. We're dying in the hallways. So, how did it come to this? This is something I plan to do some more videos on in future, because I've been looking into this. But there's a number of interesting ideas out there I've encountered that perhaps, at least when we put them together, can help explain some of the state of the West and particularly Canada today. We've got the Cloward Piven strategy, stressing all of our services and depriving people of basic necessities until our society hits a breaking point so that some kind of communist one world government can be instituted. We've got the breakdown of the international trading system, the Bretton Woods system. that is resulting in great power competition and necessitating some kind of global realignment. We have the post-war narrative of never again after the atrocity of the Holocaust, and that story explaining so much of how our societies have behaved and our institutions, and that story no longer making sense in the world we find ourselves in today. And another interesting one, I'm sure many of us have heard of Yuri Bezmenov and the idea that the Soviet Union was pumping the West full of socialist propaganda with the idea of essentially demoralizing society over time. And there's other interesting theories out there as well. And I think some combination of these ideas probably does explain why the West has become so eroded in this day and age. And of course, here in Canada, we have some of our own unique issues to throw into the mix. We have First Nation sovereignty essentially claiming all of Canada as traditional territory and having essentially a veto over new resource projects. You know, we have Quebec separatism. We've got the whole debacle with the transfer payments and how much that's stressing the Western provinces, and the idea of Albertan separatism. The fact that our economy has been almost entirely propped up on ballooning real estate prices, our incredibly bloated bureaucracy at all levels of government here in Canada. Again, you put these things together, any one of them might prove a test to our sovereignty, but combined, it's a serious issue. But regardless of the causes, my answer is the same. I really believe in this day and age we have to be smart, and we have to find a lifestyle that works for us and find how to achieve that lifestyle. So for me, that was moving to the country with my family, buying some property, being as self-sufficient as we can, and growing a lot of our own food. But for others, that may look entirely different. For those living in the city, one thing I've found useful is looking at a lot of the new immigrants to Canada. One thing I've seen, particularly in the Filipino community, the Indian community, is that families really stick together, and you'll see large families living under one roof and sharing expenses. And that's how you can get somebody who works at Tim Hortons and drives a fancy car and has nice jewelry. You know, when we are in this together and we support one another, I think the chances of weathering these stormy conditions we're facing is much better. So I've got lots more to say on many of these topics, but that's a brief introduction into what I've decided I think is going on in Canada and more broadly in the West. So appreciate any comments, anything you think I may have gotten wrong, or any additional information you have. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you have a great day.